I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. Anyway, amazingly, you'd swear I knew what was coming here, but this morning, as we're just back, there has been an update from Europol on Encrochat.
Yeah.
And I attended on the virtual. If I had have just spent a couple more days where I was, I could have popped up to, well, actually, I think it was in Lille. I don't think it was in The Hague. So this is Europol and Eurojust sort of coming together with mainly the French and the Dutch who ran this operation. And there was a couple of points to it. Now, I watched it for the whole hour and a half. I think, firstly, the figures, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and I mean, they are sensational. And secondly, I think they wanted to come together again about it to say that any of those challenges have now been upheld by the state in France and the Netherlands. So the two countries which sort of harvested the messages have robustly defended the themselves from doing that in a non-just manner.
Yeah, I think it seems like, obviously there's different legal systems, but it seems initially they've successfully got convictions. Those convictions have survived appeals, and then they seem to have gone to superior courts, much the same as in the UK, where they've got convictions and they haven't been thrown out at this point, and they seem to. Was it that they seem to feel confident now that?
No, I think I think that what has happened now is that the French Supreme Court and the same equivalent in the Netherlands have both said that the harvesting of this information was in the public interest, and that it was legal and it was within the legal framework. So there was a lot of talk about going forward with this, perhaps, needing new legislation Europe-wide or something to do with the digital.
But I mean, it's probably not dissimilar to I mean, broadly the challenges are along the same lines as the grained wire challenge against Irish laws, which are that this information was harvested in an illegal manner, that it was too broad, they took too much, they've obviously taken some criminal activity. They've probably taken some other messages that aren't necessarily related to criminality, and these are the appeals that have gone on. But again, not dissimilar to what's happened in our own country, where if you're investigating very serious crimes, the state will allow a degree of breach of privacy, and those seem to have been upheld now at this point.
And I mean, when we talk about the amount of material they harvested, now, we're going to, at the heart of this conversation again, harp back, if that's what it's sounding like from my point of view here at the moment, back to Ireland. Yeah. And where is Ireland with this? Because, so 3 years on from Encrochat, we are told today that 6,550 suspects have been arrested, amongst whom 197 are high-value targets.
Yeah.
7,134 years of imprisonment so far of convicted criminals. I can't work that one out now, what the figure would be there. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm sure there's an average. I mean, the suspects arrested, how many have been before the courts, how many convicted? They didn't give us how many convictions there have. 739 million euro in cash seized.
Which is basically approaching $1 billion, which is incredible.
An incredible amount of cash. And also, as you pointed out, doesn't it show how they still have cash?
I think it was described as liquid cash, which basically means, notes really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
obviously, they've probably seized a degree in bank accounts. And
is there any cryptocurrency in that? Because it wasn't...
No, it doesn't seem to be detailed, but they have been mentioned in some of the raids, whether they haven't assessed what that's worth or included it at this point.
But it says simply cash seized. So 154 million euro frozen in assets or bank accounts, 30 million pills of chemical drugs seized. Now that's, across the board.
So these are probably the sort of the new generation of designer drugs, stuff like ketamine and other drugs along those lines that we've seen in Ireland quite a lot.
103.5 tons of cocaine, 163 tons of cannabis, 3.3 tons of heroin. We might come back to that because that's so little compared to the other figures we're seeing there. 971 vehicles, 271 homes,
Yeah.
923 weapons and more than 21,000 rounds of ammunition, along with 68 explosives. And my favourite, 83 boats and 40 planes seized as a result of the hack on this phone network.
Yeah.
Just incredible
Yeah.
figures, absolutely extraordinary. And of course, they are all within the Eurojust regions, which were included in this investigation. And that was, included Spain, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, Ireland.
Yeah. But no.
Ireland.
Yeah. Well, go on.
So Ireland, as we've described before, we have been hugely let down in this country with the opportunity that this Encrochat hack gave law enforcement to fight organised crime. 197 high-value targets. Now, they would be top of the tree. They are people running organised crime groups.
Yeah, which, of course, this hack gave them a way into like never before.
Yeah.
Because, again, as I might have said before, these are the people that have their hands off all operations. They're not going to be found in possession of the drugs or the cash. But they obviously have been directing these gangs on encrypted phones. So that's why it was such a big revelation as well, because it allowed them to get at people that could not be gotten at before. And you see someone like Liam Byrne, who's about to be extradited to the UK on the basis of Encrochat messages. There's no way he would have ever been found, in the vicinity of drugs. So this is how they have been able to get these high value targets.
And we take our nearest neighbour, the UK, because the NCA were included in this National Crime Agency, despite the fact they're no longer in Eurojust because they aren't in Europe.
Yeah.
But given the significance of the country and the North, the PSNI also have been included. They would be seen as NCA, I think, operate in the North. But as our nearest neighbour, when they were getting the information over the course of the hack, they prioritised those high-value targets, being the ones that sort of the names, I suppose, that really popped out at them as using these Encrochat phones, the kind of messages. And sorry, before we go on, let me just get the figure for the amount of messages that were actually harvested from this. This is one of the most extraordinary figures of all. 115 million messages were harvested from this hack. So in the UK, so what happened was the messages were disseminated, gathered by the French and the Dutch, and then sent on to each relevant country. So they basically sent however many tens of millions to the UK. The UK, using computers, no doubt, and hardly humans, were able to find the high-value targets within that chitter-chatter, essentially, the messages. And they targeted them as the first kind of wave of arrests to move in on.
Yeah.
Some of these investigations started while that hack was ongoing because it might have been a threat to life or a kidnap or something very urgent that you couldn't allow happen.
Yeah.
But other stuff was the delivery of drugs and, the organisation of purchasing or selling firearms or whatever. And they were able to sit back and wait until this thing was bust, basically, until the criminals knew, and then start moving in with their evidence on their targets. So the UK moved on the high-value targets. Now, we know that there were hundreds of Encrochat phones operating in Ireland. And as their nearest neighbour, the decision that was made here was to not use and pass on the information.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that John O'Driscoll, the Assistant Commissioner then in charge of the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, has stated that he did not receive any intelligence from crime and security in this country.
Yeah.
So none of the information made it to his desk.
In terms, look, none of the Encrochat messages for sure mattered. He got some intelligence or, some intelligence was disseminated through the guards. That's possible as well.
No, he said he got nothing. He got no intelligence that was disseminated through the guards emanating from Encrochat while he was in place there. So it didn't go. I mean, I know it's so hard to believe and get your head around.
Yeah.
But my information, which is rock solid and has been stood up really by John O'Driscoll's comments, it didn't get disseminated any further when
No.
it reached Crime and Security Division in this country. It didn't go any further.
No. But I'm just arguing the devil's advocate. So they'll be building up profiles of people who are connected with people and maybe intelligence. And then if a guard in charge of a division asks for some information about some criminal, they might send them some information that they have without saying what the source of it is.
Well, you're 3 years on and it
Hasn't got there. Has anybody ever told you got this wrong?
no.
You have.
I don't have it wrong.
No, I don't.
I have it 100% correct. I have it 100% correct.
Sure.
And I know where it stopped.
Yeah.
And, given the structure of the organisation,
Yeah.
there's no question but that had to be signed off by Drew Harris
Yeah.
as the commissioner.
Yeah.
And, when you look at that conference today and the people who are there and they're talking, and what they're talking about is the future of policing.
Yeah.
It's here and now. It was here and now
Well,
3
I think
years
one of the
ago when
big questions
Encrochat happened.
to ask would be like, they took this sort of proactive action, didn't they? Where they went in and took an unprecedented step, which is really a preventative crime measure in a way.
Yeah.
So, presumably at some point they had lawyers in their own country saying, oh, this might not be a good idea, but they obviously pushed on through it and did it anyway. And I do think sometimes in this country you have this culture within the government, in particular in Ireland, that if you have a lawyer within the state apparatus who tells you, oh, you can't do that, they don't do it. And you saw that in stuff like there was controversies about hospitals being owned by the Catholic Church and somebody saying, why don't you just do that? And they always fall back on, well, the lawyers told us we couldn't do it, so we didn't do it. But obviously you see in Encrochat where these police forces kind of pushed on through it and did something that...
There's no question that this was illegal. I mean, if you're getting live information on crimes being committed in your country, you don't need to go to your lawyers and ask them.
Well, the lawyers are always going to tell you, well, that might not be,
you're getting live hack information over 2 months about crimes that are being committed, about the activities of crime gangs.
Yeah.
Your neighbours in the UK are putting in place surveillance operations. They're gathering their detailed information about high value targets, not just street dealers who are selling a couple of £100 bags of cocaine. You're talking about organised crime, and this is what today's Europol conference was all about. How this was the top level of organised crime. They were getting unprecedented information about it. Why would the police force need to consult with their lawyers?
Well, I mean, that is what has happened though here. Do you not think so?
But there's no suggestion. Nobody's told us they consulted with lawyers. I'm not sure they consulted with anyone. I think a decision was made within the Crime and Security Division that in that sort of old-fashioned attitude they have, that everything is kept to themselves, and that they can't pass on any information, and everything is about tradecraft, and we can't tell you that we bug cars because nobody knows that. And they seem to be, to me, living in the past, or certainly have been living in this, embedded in the past, in a place which doesn't belong in modern policing. Ireland has missed the opportunity to be at the table here with any of these figures. We have got nothing. Absolutely nothing out of Encrochat. Encrochat was a one-time opportunity of this century to go after organised crime, to dismantle these groups. And we missed the boat because a decision was made that, do you know what? That probably wouldn't stand up in court if we used it. Now, it has been proved in every other territory. It's standing up in court. It's working again and again. And not only in the UK, in the north of Ireland. I mean, only a border divides us.
And we have, of course, broadly an equivalent legal system to the UK. Obviously, different laws and everything like that, but we have the same basic structure of the law, which we inherited from our colonial past. It's not that different, Precedents in UK courts, of course, often travel into Irish courts as well. So, I mean, it's a.
I think it's an embarrassment on the national stage. I think it is. I really do. I think it's shocking, and it's shocking that nobody's been called out about it and nobody's talking about it. And this has gone on, and here we are with these incredible figures, this incredible success story that Encrochat is.
Mm.
And we were given all the opportunities that everyone else got, and we did nothing with them.
And what about the defence then that's been probably put out through briefings that, well, they've built up this, they probably built up this intelligence on gangs that they never would have had. They've used Encrochat in that way, and that's maybe even smarter than
But everyone else has done that as well.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? It's not a defence to say you did that. You obviously should have been doing that as well. And again, that was part of the narrative at this press conference. You, of course, would have built up intelligence. That's what the opportunity was also.
Yeah.
But should you have not moved in on anybody, not arrested anybody, not seized weapons, not seized drugs, cash,
Yeah.
criminal assets,
Yeah.
taken down high-value targets, should we have not done that? In to build up an intelligence that we would have been doing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like this
I think
hyper caution has just not served us well,
No.
But it's funny, I suppose, the whole thing about how do we correct what has happened, and that doesn't seem to be likely to happen now.
Well, we
at all, does
can't
it?
correct it now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've just missed the boat on this one.
Like even this week now, or even last week, there was further raids to do with I think it was more to do with the Sky hack
Yeah,
going on around Europe, some in Bosnia, where obviously some of the Kinahan associates have been based. The gangs weren't actually named, but they came out. There was further arrests still going on that. Is it not possible now for the Irish police to still act on information and arrest people and try and introduce this in court?
on the intelligence, you mean, that's there on the
Well, if
various
they've been
messages?
given these messages, is it too late?
They haven't been.
Do you not think so? No, but it has gone to someone, you think?
I don't think it's gone anywhere. I think it's come into the central system and it hasn't left it.
And that central system could it not send it out and try and,
But 3 years later, what use is it?
I don't know.
3 years later, you're on the back foot.
Yeah.
You couldn't possibly say you're anything else, if you've all these other police forces having dismantled organisations, being, there are some investigations, as we can see with the Kinahan one,
Yeah.
that is taking years and years and years to come to its conclusion. But by and large, I think the high value targets would be the likes of Liam Byrne.
Yeah.
And, it maybe took 3 years to bring him home.
Yeah.
And he's not home yet. Of course, he's fighting
Yeah.
extradition or will be, but nonetheless, take him as a target. Take Peter Mitchell.
Yeah.
Peter Fatso Mitchell as a target. He was brought in under Encrochat. He was based in Liverpool, or was it Wales he was in?
He was in Wales ultimately. He was
Yeah.
moving between Bradford and Wales, I think. But I mean, I suppose there's a number of real good cases in the north, which you won't go into
Yeah.
but these are people that have been there's two people, one of them from the west of Ireland and one of them from North Dublin, that are both facing charges in the north to do with the Encrochat bust.
Yeah.
But these people really built their criminal careers in the Republic. The fact that they were operating in the north is probably, a lesser part of their criminal careers. And both of these people are really well known, have appeared before the courts down here before. And the idea then that they were only dealing in the north or only operating in the north is just simply not in any way credible at all.
And totally. And I mean, if you look at the Kinahan organisation itself, and we know that it had its own communications network called Black Mars.
Yeah.
And that was something that it bought exclusively for itself, but a lot of and most of its associates as an organisation were on Encrochat phones.
Yeah. Is there an estimate about how many criminals are using them in Ireland? I mean,
Hundreds.
We're talking hundreds. Yeah.
Hundreds are using them in Ireland. Were using them in Ireland. Hundreds.
Yeah. And of course, it's not the guys selling their...
And like when we go back to that for a second and those briefings that we believe are happening. So the excuse is we used it as intelligence to build up intelligence.
Well, I mean, I think the excuse is that, the Encrochat told them that there's, they read on the Encrochat messages they're storing drugs in this warehouse, and then we went and raided the warehouse on the basis of intelligence and caught the guys with the drugs.
They didn't raid any warehouses.
Well, you know what I mean, that they used the information they had to catch people red-handed, but they didn't introduce the messages as evidence, if you know what I mean.
I don't actually understand or get that at all. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
Doesn't make any sense.
well, I don't know if it makes
Because
a lot of sense.
if that was the case,
Yeah.
we'd have seen a huge spike in red-handed sort of, drug
Well, I mean,
busts.
we don't
and
know. Like, I mean, you
We can
see
see
it.
the crime figures. We can see what's going on at this point in time
Yeah.
and around that point in time. And there's nothing to suggest that there was this incredible good luck on the side of the Gardaí.
No, I mean, there
We know
was.
for a fact that the main senior grouping that deal with organised crime did not get any intelligence or any Encrochat files. So we're back to the square one with that. It doesn't make any sense.
No, I mean, look, it's not up to me to defend briefings that I never received, but I suppose that's the suggestion that they're saying, that there was, say, somebody is transporting money, some intelligence wing hears this. It doesn't say that it's come from Encrochat, and yeah, that's
Just waffle. That's total and utter.
yeah.
Which a lot of those, as we've discussed, those sort of come over here till I tell you what the real story is.
Yeah.
Briefings are just waffly and spin. That's just spin. That just didn't happen. That just didn't happen. I mean, I'm actually going to send through a list of questions to Europol now,
Okay.
and I'm going to see what reporting they've had from Ireland as regards what has been
Yeah.
figures. I'm going to ask them for a breakdown of figures
Yeah.
from all the countries involved,
Yeah.
and let's see what we get from Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's look and let's see what let's see what we got.
So anyway, back to the conference today. 115 million messages. Now, for those techies out there, that related to, I have the note on this, 1.3 terabytes.
Yeah. What does that mean, Nicola? I'll give you a few
No, I'm
minutes
gonna
now
have
to
Google
explain.
that. What does that mean?
Well, a byte is a
Do you remember I almost downloaded the internet one day in the office?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm after. Yeah. Terabytes.
No, I almost downloaded it. Instagram, was that it?
Yeah, you're after. Yeah, you're after downloading Instagram, the whole thing.
By accident.
Yeah.
Just pressed the wrong button.
Terabytes is a lot of stuff, a lot of information. It's
Yeah.
just it's like a method of store, or it's a degree of storage.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the other interesting bit is, didn't they refer to who was behind the Encrochat
It did.
network? Like, obviously, the Encrochat was a company, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't a secretive thing. They were operating openly in terms of they had a registered business address and all of that. They sold the phones publicly and advertised them. However, they were kind of discussing who was behind all of it, because that's less clear, I think, is it? Who was the structures of...
Well, it's very interesting, actually, that bit of it. Now, they said that the server was held in a commercial property in France, in Rouen or something, in the north of France. And they were able to track that down. But they talk about the people behind Encrochat, as in the kind of the structure, the company being an organised crime group. And I haven't heard them refer to that before like that. In the past, Enetcom and other sort of the earlier Phantom Secure, they were actually properly legitimate businessmen behind them, with just sort of, they both of which have seen convictions in relation to the RICO laws in the US, but they were kind of businesses and they didn't have criminal backgrounds, these people. But they're describing Encrochat, is the actual company behind it, as being an organised crime group and having tiers.
Yeah.
So there was one brains, they call it, the brains behind Encrochat. A journalist from France asked a question at the end of it, was that individual arrested in the Dominican Republic? That question wasn't answered. Or had that individual been arrested? I think the officials said that they had lifted up to 3 people, or 3 people in France have been charged with crimes about in around the Encrochat. So they would be mid-ranking management in it. They talk about these mid-ranking members being in France and the Netherlands, and they're the ones who deal with the salespeople underneath them. So they would be like the directors, I presume, of the company. And there is some CEO up the top of it who hasn't been
publicly identified
yet. but they are hunting this individual. Now, he's located outside the EU, they said officially.
Yeah.
And that's when the journalist then later asked about the Dominican Republic.
Because there have been prosecutions after they're in some of these US cases where
Oh yeah, they've been convicted
of not
of RICO, under the RICO laws, which are the money
kind of-
laundering.
well, it's kind of racketeering laws as they call it in the US, which is basically directing criminal organizations or allowing a criminal organization to operate. Like, I thought it was interesting that they said there was 60,000 users of Encrochat. I mean, what percentage of them were using it for illicit purposes? I mean, if you consider that there's 6,500 people arrested, I mean, you must be talking a good half the people were.
No, I think they've kind of pretty much said straight out that it's mainly used by pretty much majority.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys texting their mistresses or whatever, but
Perhaps.
I mean, the vast majority of it is for criminality, and I suppose that would lead you then to think that the people who run this business know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we've seen that, of course, in other online businesses, like in involving the George the Penguin Mitchell, where the people operating these dark websites have been prosecuted for that type of organized criminality, because really there's very few people have any need for
That
encrypted phones.
Exactly.
They
talk about the kind of charges that they're likely to bring or are bringing against the owners of the company Encrochat, and they're talking about conspiracy to import illegal
guns and drugs and weapons, basically.
Money laundering, and supplying cryptocurrency.
I don't know. Yeah.
And laundering cryptocurrency, because it was amazing that there was no actual mention of a value of cryptocurrency seized.
Yeah.
And yet it has to be crypto, mainly, surely, behind transactions made through in the last few years, surely?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
What does that amount of cash look like? 739 million. Like, where do they store that? What currencies is that in? Like,
well, we've seen huge seizures of cash in Ireland, like, haven't we, where, they're I mean,
739 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, this is what you see.
Escobar stuff.
Yeah, and you see it again and again, though. The drugs come in and the cash comes back.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way system, isn't it?
I suppose when it's divvied up, among the 558 suspects or whatever, they've got that in different places. But where have they stored that?
I don't know, and what do they do with it then?
Is there a big warehouse somewhere that there's like piled high with cash and you can just...
Do they put it back? I don't know, yeah.
I'm sure it's banked. I mean, I'm not that stupid.
No.
I don't imagine it's in a warehouse, but it is just interesting to think what that might look like.
Yeah.
So, yes, the press conference today was mainly Eurojust, Europol, the Netherlands and the French. There was a lot of slapping one another on the back, a lot of talk of, the cooperation. I mean, that is a message Europe is trying to put out there about the level of cooperation between the various territories in their fight against organised crime. That's not going to strike terror and criminals, but it's going to make them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I think you just see that the European Union and some other states have really started to get a handle on the fact that it's a multinational business. But it's like, you see, if you read all these reports from around, these organizations in South America, they're just always emphasizing how important Europe has become, haven't they, as financially to the cartels and the production of cocaine, as a marketplace. And you just see now that the European police forces have really started to get on top of what was an incredible boom time in Europe for cocaine.
They talked about a couple of the new elements of what they discovered from this hack, and how basically this hack gave them a window into what the criminal underworld is like, in recent years, as in what it had become. They said that before that they were literally operating on kind of old intelligence, I suppose. They were
basically human intelligence.
Human intelligence, they were a step behind the criminals, I suppose. There was 1 million photos and videos on this, 1.3 terabytes, by the way. But what I thought was interesting, two things. Firstly, that they put a figure on the amount of assassinations they had stopped in their tracks about to happen. Now, that's over those countries that they didn't detail which countries they were due to happen in or anything about them. But we're talking about, I think there's about 9 or 12 countries who were included in this, including Ireland. So out of them, there's 100 assassinations or kidnappings that could have resulted in the threat or the end of a life.
Yeah.
They said they intervened in that many of them over the time. They wouldn't describe exactly how many hitmen were arrested as part of this thing, but what they did say was that they had detected something new, which was organised crime groups who they described as supplying crime as a service. So in other words, they had discovered that there were these organised crime groups in existence that were literally offering a service of extortion, or else there was groups that were offering to kill. So you could basically, instead of having to have your own hitman, they've actually farmed it out in the same way businesses bring in people on contracts now. They don't want to staff people up. So they outsource it. The criminal underworld is outsourcing murder, kidnapping, torture.
Yeah.
Obviously, we saw that torture chamber in the Netherlands, but it appears that there was quite a few of these things, and they actually said that it was pretty much too distressing to discuss a lot of what they had discovered. But you were mentioning about that grouping in Spain.
Yeah, there was a grouping in Spain earlier this year. They were arrested. They were suspects as well in the shooting of an Irishman in the Malaga area. But what the Spanish police described them as is the people were arrested were a number of UK nationals. They were based in Spain. They were guns for hire. They weren't affiliated with any group in particular. They just travelled around the south of Spain carrying out hits and shootings. And that as they described it, because of the fact that they're not part of a gang that is being monitored, that everybody knows within that gang knows what they're doing, that these people are very hard to detect because they literally just get a payment, do something and move along. And they were they had pictures of them being raided, the amount of weapons taken off was quite shocking. And I suppose we saw even a sense of that even in the Barry Young trial, where you have these non-affiliated criminals were being brought in by Barry Young's gang to extort money from people. And it just makes the whole policing of it a lot harder. If you think back to if you look at, say, the Fat Freddie Thompson gang and the police knew exactly who was there and exactly who was suspected of doing what. But if they can just text somebody on an encrypted phone that has no particular connection with the area, who can come in and out and not be recognised even by criminals in the area, like, you can see how it's much, much harder to police. But that's obviously what they're referring to, these and that's what happens, of course, in the digital world. You get people develop specialities because they can and they can be accessed.
It's just evolving, isn't it, in the same way as the rest of the world. And Imre Arakas, of course, is part of a big grouping of Eastern European hitmen for hire. I think they were based down around the
Exactly. And they were brought in to carry out hits in countries. Obviously, that Imre Arakas broader organisation was suspected of carrying out one of the famous murders in the UK, wasn't it? Of Goldfinger.
John Goldfinger Palmer.
Yeah. Who, like, he obviously wasn't convicted of that, Imre Arakas, but that was being mentioned as a.
He was certainly a suspect in the way that he had sort of got so up close and personal with the victim, because he had gone right up to the wall of his home, and he had found a place. Whoever the hitman or woman was had found a place that was the only place not covered with cameras, and had literally been able to be almost breathing down his neck when he killed him. And that's what Arakas tended to like to do. Almost touch his victim before he killed them,
Yeah, but there was, even though Arakas was mentioned as a suspect, there was no sense that he knew Palmer or had any business dealings with him as such. So you can see the value of that. And of course, even if you go back to the days of George the Penguin Mitchell, wasn't members of his crew being flown into UK to carry out hits back in the day? So, and they were being flown in to UK because people wouldn't know them and they get in and out. And we saw that again even in during the feud. We had David Hunter, who was flown in from the UK and shot Michael Barr in the Sunset House. He was literally a gun for hire and was brought in because he could come in and out.
It kind of makes total sense when you talk about it like that. It's like as if, the staffed up hitman is a thing of the past.
Yeah, it is a thing of the past because of the fact that you're going to have the gossip in the local area.
And because of the flights and the facial recognition and airports
you're going to
and everything.
See people are going, oh, there's your man walking down, I saw him. And,
It's extraordinary. It's in the same way that certain jobs in the ordinary world
Yeah.
become almost defunct, and they
Yeah.
become, you can hire somebody in.
Well,
just
it does.
To
I
do
mean,
it
this
for-
is the digital economy allows increased specialization, and
Yeah.
that's what they say.
Yeah.
So-
Well, look, we will come back to Encrochat again. I'll put in those questions to Europol and see if I can get a breakdown of.
Give them
all
another kicking,
give them another
Nicola, in the
kicking, yeah.
future.
Yeah, well, maybe I suppose I could. I mean, Drew Harris would be always welcome in here to
No doubt.
talk about it if
No
you
doubt.
wanted to. And anybody else that wanted to talk about it can do. But in the meantime, look, the facts are in front of us, the figures are there. And the truth is that unfortunately, Ireland has missed one of the greatest opportunities in fighting organised crime in decades.
Certainly the numbers speak for themselves.